Now, a couple of weeks ago, I shared a split screens effect that you could download and then use it on your videos to create vertical cinematic videos for Instagram, YouTube Shorts, pretty much anything that's vertical. Now, in that video, I showcased these 3D phone that, well, it was actually a fake 3D phone. I used an SVG file to create that in Fusion. So in this video, that is what we're gonna be doing. And it's not that complicated. It just requires a little bit of mixing with 3D and a couple of layers. So let's get started. The first thing that we are going to need to do is actually download an SVG file. Now, if you want me to, I can actually just share the file somewhere that we're using in this video. So then you can just use these to build your own effect. The first thing that we're gonna be doing is to create a new Fusion composition. So let's create a Fusion composition and we're gonna name this phone, and we're gonna just drag this entire timeline. You can see these other MP4 one here that's already rendered so that it doesn't have to re-render every time I play it right here. Okay, we're gonna go into this Fusion composition, and here the first thing we're gonna do, as always, is add a background node. When you add a background node, it basically gives the base canvas for us to build our composition. Now here, what we wanna do is go up here to where it says Fusion, then import, and there we're gonna find the SVG. Now I have this shortcut here, but for some reason when I use it, it just never activates, so I have to always do it manually. Once you open that, you will have to find the SVG file wherever you have downloaded and put it here. This is already in my downloads folder, so we're just gonna activate that and open this in Fusion. By default, you can just leave it like that, or you can make these smaller. If you slide these, they will adapt by itself like that, right? We can make these a little bit smaller just because, I guess. Actually, let's make these 1080 and see what the equivalent is. Yeah, that looks good. Now to connect these into a 3D space, what we're gonna be using is a 3D layer. But that's right here, so image plane 3D. If you press 2 on this image plane, you will see that we have the phone right here, and it looks like a flat image, so it doesn't have any depth. And unfortunately, not yet, but in other 3D software like Blender and maybe even in After Effects, you're able to adjust the depth of pretty much any object that you turn into a 3D space. Unfortunately, here in DaVinci, that's not possible yet, even though we can just move these and even scale these, but it doesn't do anything if I move this Z or the depth of this layer, right? But we're gonna be working around these and we're gonna find a solution for that. Before we can connect these, we need to have a renderer. For whenever you work in 3D space, you are going to need a rendering node for the 3D space. And that's this one right here, render 3D. We're gonna connect these here, and then we can connect these into our background node right here. And it's all white because the phone got disconnected. Let's plug that in again. And we're gonna use a 3D merge node because we're gonna be doing something in a little bit, and you will understand why. So we're gonna add a merge node, which is this one. Just click right here and it will be added automatically, and then we can make these go a little bit backwards like that. If we look at the phone right here, by opening these, it looks a little bit crazy and scary because there's so many nodes and everything has a similar name, so it gets really confusing, right? If you look at these, if we press 2 so we can see only this composition, we're gonna be able to see the different parts of the phone. Now, one thing we will want to do is we're gonna have to find whichever the inside screen is, and that's gonna be probably somewhere close to here. Let's disconnect this one and see how that looks, or actually just changing the color will be enough to do this. Okay, now that we have here the space that's gonna be our screen, now we can basically reuse this mask to have that be our media in section, because we want to put something inside this screen, right? So we're gonna copy this mask and we're gonna paste it outside of here, and then we're just gonna press Ctrl E and close this group again like that, so it's a little bit more organized. Now that we're here, we're gonna be able to add our media in here. Usually you won't want this to be behind, so it will be layered, so it looks a little bit more realistic, right? But for this case, we can keep these simple and it should do the work, because we're later on going to add a light that's going to help us a little bit with the sort of like glare effect that phones screens have. We're going to use this video right here. Okay, now that we have that video, we're going to bring these into our timeline, and actually you can just add these later on in it's a little bit confusing to work with videos like these inside Fusion, because you have to adjust the in and out points right here, and it can be a little bit tricky sometimes. So you have to find the accurate point if there is a specific part that you want to show up, right? But if I were to build this as a template, there might be a way for me to just use these as an effect. So then you just drag these into a clip and the media in will show up automatically in there. Let me know down in the comments if you want me to build an effect for this specific phone style of animation. That way you can just use these like that. If enough of you do, maybe I'll build it up and share it in another video in the future. Now we're gonna connect these masks to our media in, and we're gonna go and connect these to our phone and see how that looks. Yep, it doesn't look that well because the mask is not completely in the same output that the phone has. Okay, now the mask was messed up for some reason, but we're gonna delete that and we're gonna go back again and find these here in the group. And now that we have these other background, it should work properly. Let's see. No. But if we go and connect these to the merge node, then it works properly. So we're gonna be connecting the mask to the merge node instead of the media in, because the media in is basically copying it's basically using the default. As you can see here where it says data, it's 1920 by 1080. So the mask basically takes that as the background, and then it adapts, and that's why it's it was showing up stretched like that. Now that we have that there, we can continue with the next portion, which is we're gonna actually add a transform here, and we're gonna press Ctrl and spacebar and add a transform here. That way we can adjust the media in that we have here and put these like it would look in a vertical, like in a phone, right? Now that we have that set up, we have this merge node right here. This merge node is what we're gonna be using to animate things. If we rotate these, we can see it there and basically moving everywhere around. The cool thing about merge nodes is that you can add another image plane, and that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna add another image plane, and we're gonna use that as the background to create basically the depth for the phone. It's not gonna look like a super realistic 3D phone mockup, but it will do the job when you wanna showcase something quickly, right? So first, we're gonna have to go back to the phone, and we're gonna find these, which is the background of the whole phone, which is basically the body of the phone. And we're gonna copy that and paste it outside. And then we can press Ctrl E and then close that group again. And we're gonna add these into another 3D layer or a 3D plane. After we do that, we can connect these to the merge node. And if we press 2 and so that we can see the 3D space and go to this plane, we can move this around and you can see that it's black and it looks like that. Now, the reason why I did this initially was because we have these as a double view in this image plane. Now, if we go here, you can see there's cold faces where it says visibility. If you press front, it's not gonna show anything when you're looking from this side. And the same if you press back. And we don't want that because, well, you can if you want to do that, but it's a little bit harder to actually match the image plane that we have here. So the easiest way to do this and the most accurate way to do this is going to be using the controllers that we have. So we're going to go here in the transform controllers of the second image plane, and we're going to go back and put this at 0, and then holding Control, gonna move the Z just 1 point right there. Now we have that covered, and we're not gonna be seeing that section anymore, like the background being repeated basically. Now we can go and press Ctrl and spacebar and add a duplicate, which also has a 3D version, and that's what we're gonna be using here. Here we can add as many copies as you want, and let's go for like 10 just for now. I can't remember what I did originally, but we're gonna be playing around with it. Holding Control in the offset, we're gonna be trying to do the same that we did before. And since it is a phone, it's not gonna be super fat or super deep, so we're gonna just add these just 1 -0.001 and see how it looks. If you are close enough, you might still see some details of it. If we add more copies, let's say 100, let's say 15 copies, we can actually reduce the number right here, and that's gonna make them become closer to each other. Now this method is not perfect because if you zoom in, you sometimes will see that there's this little space here, and the only way to fix that is by bringing these super close to the original one and adding more copies. But -0.001 should be the optimal that we're going to be working with most likely, because it still has a little bit of depth, but it's not too much. Okay, if we go back to the media out view and we play around with the merge 3D rotation, we're gonna see how it's adding a little bit of a depth effect, and obviously it's not gonna look like a super 3D mockup. I can make a tutorial on using an actual 3D mockup in the future if you want me to, but that it's allowing us to have this sort of fake 3D phone effect that then we can animate by just using the merge node 3D transform values. And that's what we're gonna do right now, just so that we can see how it works. And when using a lot of duplicates, as I mentioned, you have to be careful just because it's gonna take a lot more time to render. You're not gonna be able to see the changes that you make right away, right? As you can see here. Any change that I make right here, you can see the render 3D has to process. So it will take a little bit longer than just using a normal 2D phone basically. Okay, so we're gonna animate these quickly and then we should be set ready to go. Now, before I forget, I'm gonna add the light so that we have a little bit sort of like a glare here. We're gonna go to the 3D view, and here we're gonna add the spotlight, and we're gonna go and add these there. Now the thing with 3D here is that if you add the spotlight to this merge 3D, whenever you make a change to the 3D merge node, that's gonna change too. As you can see here, the light is flipped. So what we want to do is we're gonna take these and connect these into another merge 3D. So we're gonna drag this here. Now we have a second one. Hold shift is if it doesn't connect automatically, and we're gonna connect the light here. Now we have this light that's gonna be still as the phone rotates, basically sort of like having the phone on one of those rotating things that are used for photography. And here we can just look at where our cone is and set up the different controls. Make these bigger, like that, and then we have to rotate these so that we can see these. And we cannot really see anything right here. So if we go here to lighting and press that, we can see the light activated, and right now we cannot really see it unless we get really close. There it goes. I was in this merge node 3D here, so I couldn't see it because the light was connected to this merge node right here. Now if we go to the, actually before I show you a little bit more of where we're gonna set up the light, if we go to the 3D of the renderer and you click here the enable lighting and shadows, you're gonna be able to see how the lighting is affecting it in the final render. If you don't do that, then it's not gonna show you how it's affected, and it's not gonna look as well as if it was being lit by an external source, basically. Here we're gonna use the rotation of not the merge node, but the spotlight. When you rotate a merge node, it basically moves everything that has connected to it. You can see how it's affected right here. I think leaving the light right here should be good enough. And actually, I want to make the light a little bit less strong probably. So we're going to decrease the intensity, and then we have that. Now, if you want, you can play around more with this and add like a glow effect to the actual screen that you are working with, so that it looks like it's a screen glowing. But for this purpose, we're gonna leave these as it is. Now it's a little bit too much still. I'm gonna have to go back and just change these like that. We can put these. So now it's a lot of testing around and seeing how things are looking. And after you find something that you like, there it should be subtle enough. Not enough yet. Okay, now adding the 3 light always adds a little bit of a weird touch, so you have to be tweaking a lot of stuff. So if you don't want to deal with that headache, you can just skip the lighting section so that it looks a little bit more like that. And it's gonna look a little bit more like cartoonish, I guess, but we're gonna be, although if I keep testing and moving around, it's gonna take a long time for us to actually just get it right. So I'm gonna show you the animation section, and then you can experiment, more with the actual spotlight and adding lights on your own so that you can just find what works and looks best for you. Okay, to animate these, it's not that complicated. As I mentioned earlier, we're gonna use the Merge 3D. We're gonna go and add a keyframe here to maybe not the depth unless you really want to, and we're gonna add the vertical positioning for the keyframe and a little bit of rotation. Most likely we're gonna rotate these like 30 something degrees, not too much. We're gonna keep these subtle, and we're gonna move these all the way down so that it's off screen. Now it's off screen, and now we're gonna go 24 frames, and we're gonna create the next keyframes. We're gonna add these keyframes right here just to be sure. We're gonna set the Y values to 0. That's gonna bring these to the center of the screen, and we can actually make these a little bit smaller or like further away. And we're gonna bring the rotation to, let's bring these to 1 instead of 0, or maybe a little bit, so there's a little bit still in like flipped, not completely in front of the camera. Okay, and then we can look at these like that. First, it has to render, obviously. And if you want to add a motion blur to these, there isn't a way to add motion blur from the 3D section, but you can add these to the 3D renderer. So that's right here under settings in the 3D render section. So we can add the motion blur, decrease this to 80 or 30, so it's a little bit subtle. And finally, we're gonna go to the merge node, and using the spline tool, we're gonna zoom to view, select everything, and here you can play around with the spline and the curvature values, basically easing in and out of the animation. We're gonna press T, and here that's what I like to do, just that, so that they're all basically aligned. And we're gonna be looking at these. Now it's gonna be taking a little bit to render, so if you want, you can actually go here to the playback and change the proxy mode to half. That way, when you're working, you're able to see it more clearly without having to wait for it to render every time. And the reason why it's also taking a little bit to render is because it has the video playing in the background. So let's look at these right now. We have the phone right there. And if you want, you can add a little bit of motion for it to be like floating, or it's really up to you, and you can keep playing around with it more. And if we look at these and set a background to it, go into the effects, generators, background, then we're gonna add a color to these. And if we look at these here in the edit view, there's still one more thing that we can do, and I think you would want to do these better in the actual composition here. You can do it inside Fusion, or you can do it in here, which is adding a little bit of a drop shadow. For that, go to the effects section, and we're gonna find a drop shadow. Actually, that's in the open effects section, and we're gonna drag this here, and then you can play around with the drop shadow values like that. And that's gonna add a little bit more to the render time, to just keep that in mind when you're doing these. Okay, now if we look at these, we can see that the phone is rendering basically, and after it's done, you can add more stuff. You can stack text behind these, between the solid color and the phone, and add these to the scene that you're working with. It's pretty up to you what you can do with it. There's a lot of things you can add, just images, more videos, or even other graphics inside of this phone. Now, thanks for taking the time to actually watch all the way through here, if you have, and I hope this video was helpful. If you enjoyed this video, you can give it a like, that way it's pushed to more people by the algorithm. If you want me to create a template for these, and so that you can just drag these and drop these into basically any image that you have, Let me know down in the comments and I will try to do so and then update you in a future video if I actually do it, because that will take a little bit more time, because it's going to be a little bit different, because I will still have to let you change the animation of the template without it being just one animation. Unless you want me to set up a couple of default animations, then I can do that too and we can play around with that. Okay, that is it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed and I hope that it didn't take way too long for these. I hope to see you in the next video here in SUALVI.